Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into it, looking at that huge summit. You know the one.
The Trump-Putin meeting in Anchorage, Alaska. Highly anticipated, definitely.
Exactly. And we want to give you the full picture, so we're pulling from a couple of key places. We've got an Al Jazeera report that dropped right after the summit.
And also some really important commentary from CNN, including what Fareed Zakaria had to say.
Right. So our goal here, our mission, if you like, is to try and cut through all the noise, get past the big headlines.
Yeah, we want to dig out the key bits of info, look at the different angles on what actually happened, and, well, figure out what it means for you listening and for the wider world picture.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So first off, the location itself. Anchorage, Alaska, kind of an unusual stage for this kind of thing.
A bit symbolic, maybe, that proximity?
Maybe, yeah. In the atmosphere, right when Putin arrived, it was, well, striking. Sources called it a warm welcome.
We're talking red carpet, President Trump meeting him with a handshake right there on a U.S. airbase.
And think about the timing. This was Putin's first time, actually, on Western soil since ordering the full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February 2022.
That's a huge point, and people immediately noticed the difference, didn't they, compared to how Trump had received President Zelensky earlier in the year.
Oh, absolutely. That was described as a much frostier reception for the Ukrainian president at the White House. A real contrast.
And you can see why observers jumped on that. I mean, straight away, they're calling this warm welcome a kind of diplomatic win for Putin.
After being basically shunned by the West for years. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just fascinating how much the visuals, the optics can say before anyone even sits down to talk. It really sets a tone.
A very welcoming tone for Putin in this case. So let's get into the meeting itself. It was actually quite short.
Less than 3 hours, apparently.
Right.
And held completely behind closed doors.
Right. And this is key afterwards. When they came out, no questions. None taken from that huge crowd of international reporters and cameras waiting there.
Just statements. And Putin, when he spoke, he seemed pretty upbeat, actually.
He did. He mentioned greeting Trump with, good afternoon, dear neighbor.
Referencing the Alaska-Russia geography. He added, we are close neighbors, and it's a fact. Almost a bit folksy, wasn't it?
It really was, for such a tense situation. He also said the meeting was long overdue.
And he expressed hope, saying something like, the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring close that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine.
But then he added that quite direct message aimed at Kyiv in Europe.
Oh, yeah, basically saying, we expect that Kyiv and European capitals will perceive that constructively.
And that they won't throw a wrench in the works. He warned against backroom dealings or provocations that could torpedo nascent progress.
And that framing is really interesting, isn't it? He's basically putting the responsibility on Ukraine and Europe not to block whatever this nascent progress is supposed to be.
Which raises the question.
Yeah, what kind of agreement or progress are we even talking about if there's no ceasefire on the table? It feels like he's setting up a narrative there.
Definitely. Shifting potential blame down the road, maybe.
It certainly looks like a classic diplomatic move.
Yeah.
Laying the groundwork.
Okay, so turning to Trump, how did he respond? He thanked Putin for what he called a very profound statement.
And described the meeting itself as very productive.
But his assessment was, well, a bit more complex, maybe. He said, there were many, many points that we agreed on. Most of them, I would say.
But then admitted a couple of big ones that we haven't quite got there, but we've made some headway.
And then that key line. So there is no deal until there is a deal. Very Trumpian.
Classic Trump, yeah. He also said he'd brief NATO and President Zelensky, adding it's ultimately up to them.
He did repeat that many points were agreed to, but, no specifics given.
Right. He mentioned one is probably the most significant of the sticking points, but just said, we didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. Lots of hedging.
So, despite all this talk of progress and agreement, the bottom line, the really clear outcome was, well, nothing concrete on the war itself.
Exactly. No deal to halt the war, and specifically no ceasefire agreed upon, which was, for many, the main hope.
It feels like a bit of an anticlimax after all the buildup.
Absolutely. And you could almost sense that feeling coming out of Kyiv immediately. It was described as anticlimactic.
Yeah, I saw that quote from Alexei Honcharenko, the Ukrainian opposition lawmaker. He put it bluntly on Telegram.
What did he say? Something about buying time.
Yeah. It seems Putin has bought himself more time. No ceasefire or de-escalation has been agreed upon. Stark.
Very stark. And that assessment aligns with some of the reporting, doesn't it?
It does. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, looking at how different people interpreted this non-deal.
Right, the analysis phase.
Al Jazeera's reporters on the ground in Anchorage had some takes. Kimberly Halkett suggested Trump might face criticism back home because the summit basically all became much ado about nothing.
Ouch. Did she elaborate?
Yeah, she added, the only achievements that were actually made was that the Russian president has been able to continue his war, which we know is now a war of attrition.
And which each day favors the Russian side. That's the crucial part. He has bought time.
That's a powerful assessment.
It really is. And if you connect those dots, Putin buying time, the war of attrition favoring Russia, it points towards, well, a kind of strategic win for Moscow, even without a formal piece of paper.
So the process itself, the meeting happening, the warm welcome, that becomes the win.
Potentially, yes. It normalizes things, buys time, maybe shifts the narrative slightly. It shows how diplomacy can work on multiple levels, even when the headline goal isn't met.
Okay, but not everyone saw it quite that way, or at least the tone was different elsewhere. Let's bring in CNN.
Right, what were they saying?
Well, Fareed Zakaria apparently called the whole summit cringeworthy, particularly after Trump's no deal until there's a deal comment.
Cringeworthy is strong.
It is. And CNN flagged other reactions, too. John Bolton, for instance. His take was, Trump did not lose, but Putin clearly won.
So, another perspective leaning towards a Putin advantage there.
Yeah. And then there was a comment from Whelan, quoted as saying, Trump is trying to make a deal with the devil. Pretty pointed.
Wow, yeah. Intense reactions.
Though, interestingly, it was also reported that Putin praised Trump, said he made sincere efforts to end war.
And Trump apparently felt they had a shot at peace.
That's what was reported, yes. So you have these completely different reads, don't you?
You really do. How do you square that? Who won? Who lost? Was there progress or not? The fact that the main goal, the ceasefire, didn't happen, you still get these widely different interpretations.
It just shows how complex judging these things is, right? It's not always clear-cut. Depends on what metrics you're using, I suppose.
Absolutely. The subjectivity is huge, especially when the tangible results are ambiguous, let's say.
Definitely ambiguous. And just to wrap up the summit details, that final exchange between them was quite notable, too.
Oh, right. The farewell.
Trump said something like, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon, and probably see you again very soon.
And Putin's response was immediate, wasn't it?
Swift. Next time in Moscow.
Wow. Okay.
And Trump's reaction to that idea, he apparently acknowledged he might get a little heat on that one, but said he could possibly see it happening.
Just leaving that hanging there. Quite the ending.
So, after all that, what does this all mean for you, listening?
Well, I think when you boil it all down, this deep dive really highlights a central tension in this kind of diplomacy.
Yeah.
You had this massive, heavily publicized event.
Huge buildup.
Exactly. And on one side, you could argue it delivered a kind of diplomatic win for Putin, the optics, the legitimacy of the meeting itself. But on the other, it clearly fell short on the most hoped-for outcome, stopping the fighting, the ceasefire.
And as we've seen, people read that lack of a deal in totally different ways. Who really came out ahead? It's not obvious.
Not at all. Depends on your perspective.
And maybe for you, our listener, the takeaway here is that sometimes in these really high-stakes global moments, the actual deal, or lack thereof, isn't the whole story.
Right. There are other factors at play.
Think about this. If a meeting doesn't hit its main target, like a ceasefire, but it does manage to shift perceptions or maybe just buy valuable time for one side, could you still call that a strategic success? And if so, for who?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Something to definitely mull over as you try to make sense of these big, complicated global events.